South China Morning Post, 11th of March 2023, how a deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran demonstrates Beijing's power in the Middle East. According to observers, the resumption of diplomatic relations between Iran and Saudi Arabia due to a deal mediated by Beijing shows China's expanding clout and impact in the Middle East. At a time when U.S. relations with the region were in doubt, the announcement by the two countries indicated Beijing was stepping up its economic engagement with the Middle East to put a greater emphasis on security, they claimed. The diplomatic community was taken aback when news of the 4 days of talks between representatives of the two nations and Beijing during China's annual legislative session broke, despite Beijing's increased presence in the area over the previous 10 years. According to John Calabrese, head of the Middle East Asia Project at the US-based Middle East Institute think tank, Beijing's mediation of re-establishing diplomatic relations between the nations is positive, if somewhat unexpected, development. Given China's expanding economic footprint and growing ambitions in the Gulf, the rift between Riyadh and Tehran has arguably been the most challenging for Beijing to navigate. The talks were held in secrecy until a trilateral statement on Friday claimed Iran and Saudi Arabia had agreed to resume diplomatic ties and reopen embassies within 2 months. The Chinese government was also thanked for hosting the meetings by Tehran and Riyadh. Ali Shamkhani, Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council, represented Iran at the talks, and Musaid bin Mohammed Al Ibn, National Security Advisor of Saudi Arabia, led the Saudi team. The words were held by Communist Party Politburo member and China's top diplomat Wang Yi. As tensions over Riyadh's execution of a Shiite Muslim cleric escalated, Saudi Arabia severed links with Iran, leading to deteriorating relations between the two Middle Eastern countries. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the agreement set a positive example for nations looking to negotiate peaceful solutions to regional disputes. The deal helped countries escape external interference and grasp their fate in their own hands. China respects the nations in the Middle East as the area's masters and does not have a vested stake in the region. According to the ministry, China opposes geopolitical rivalry in the Middle East and won't attempt to establish an exclusive bloc or fill the power gap. According to Fan Hongda, a professor at Shanghai International Studies University's Middle East Studies Institute, there were numerous points of contention between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Not every significant power could unite the two countries for a fruitful negotiation. Other Middle East countries will have more expectations on China, and the possibility for China to push for resolving difficult issues in the region will be elevated, he said, if the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran can advance. China's interaction with the Middle East has increased. Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi and Chinese President Xi Jinping recently toured Saudi Arabia and China. 34 energy and business agreements were signed between the two countries, and Xi pledged to deepen Beijing and Riyadh's cooperation. In the first 3 quarters of last year, 17.8% of China's oil imports came from Saudi Arabia. There have reportedly been discussions about settling energy trades in the countries' respective currencies, which would lessen their dependence on the US dollar. China and Iran announced during Raisi's visit that they would improve strategic communication between their defense organizations and increase military exchanges and collaboration at all levels. Researcher Nadim Ahmed Munakal at the Rasana International Institute for Iranian Studies in Riyadh claimed that Tehran was experiencing international isolation due to anti-government demonstrations over the previous year, and the deadlock over a nuclear deal dashed hopes for an end to economic sanctions. He said China is uniquely positioned in the area, and Beijing shares common goals with Saudi Arabia and Iran. This is despite global geopolitical shifts. China's presence in the Middle East has considerably increased due to closer cooperation with regional powers. The agreement is a crucial move that will be portrayed as a significant diplomatic win for China. This shows Beijing's expanding influence in the region on the economic and diplomatic fronts. Expert on China-US relations and professor of international affairs at Nanjing University, Zhu Feng, said Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to build infrastructure around the world to promote trade, would benefit from China's initiative in pushing for the agreement between the two rivals. He predicted that Washington would undoubtedly view this matter as Beijing's attempt to intensify its strategic rivalry with the US in the Middle East. Since the Pahlavi dynasty was overthrown in 1979 by Shiite clerics in Iran during the Islamic Revolution, ties between Saudi Arabia and Iran have been tense. Riyadh was concerned Tehran would spread the revolution and exert more power in the area. Additionally, the two countries have taken opposing positions in local wars, such as those in Yemen and Syria. According to Tuvia Gering, a researcher at the Israel-China Policy Center of the Tel Aviv-based Institute for National Security Studies, China benefited from mediating the agreement because a protracted war between Iran and Saudi Arabia would be detrimental to its interests. He claimed that China's more significant influence was one factor in its success, where Russia, Iraq, and Oman had fallen short. It has many other alluring carrots to give or withhold, and it is Saudi Arabia's and Iran's biggest trading partner. Although we are unsure of what China had to provide each party to smooth the deal, it is safe to assume that it had something that both parties required. Wang declared that the deal was a victory of dialogue and peace and that it shows that the Ukraine issue is not the only problem the world faces today. Wang concluded the negotiations on Friday. Also on Friday, John Kirby, a spokesperson for the White House National Security Council, rejected that the U.S. was withdrawing from the Middle East, adding that the durability of the Beijing agreement might be in doubt. Analysts argued it was too soon to determine how the agreement would affect China's sway in the area. According to reports, Saudi Arabia has requested assistance from Washington for its civilian nuclear program and security assurance. The U.S. is attempting to mediate the opening of diplomatic ties between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Despite being novel, today's breakthrough wasn't Camp David, according to Gering, who alluded to the 1978 negotiations that laid the groundwork for a vital peace deal between Egypt and Israel. All three parties have reasonable cause to see today's development as the most significant advancement in diplomatic relations since the invention of sliced bread, but what will China do if things don't work out and a new conflict breaks out? Will China then accept its obligations? The ability of China to take responsibility for errors, just as it does for triumphs like today, will be the actual litmus test of its influence in the region.